Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back with another cool pinball repair video for you this evening. Now, if you missed our first one, go watch our first one. We are working on a Williams Pat Hand pinball machine. And in the first video, we kind of showed the condition that it was in when we got it. And we worked through the bottom of the cabinet here. And we went through and we adjusted all of the relays and cleaned all of the switches. And we rebuilt a couple stepper units. And we worked on the score motor, and we found some problems here and there and everywhere. And the sum total of the whole first video is we got these lights to blink. Now, I know that's not much, but it's a start, right? So go watch that if you haven't and you're interested in how we systematically work through these things to bring them back to life. But since we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on this back box. So there's some stuff up here in the back box that needs worked on. And that will get us to where we can actually attempt to start the game. We have the play field over here on the wall, well out of the way. We will be working on it. It's coming, people. Don't fret. The day will come when we will work on it. Maybe in this video, I don't know. Let's see how long it takes to do the back box. But whenever we do them, the first thing that we do is we clean them up. We follow the power line in. It comes down into the bottom, goes through some switches to the transformer, and then all of this stuff. And then there are some Jones plugs, they call them. They come up here to the back and plug into the back box. We got all those cleaned up, but we haven't messed with anything actually in the back box yet. So that is next up on our list. So we're going to do that now. So the very, 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 very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the vacuum cleaner and clean it up a little bit. If you see, there is actually a mud dauber nest in the side of it there, and there's one up there. We don't need none of that. Okay, and so after we do that, we're going to rebuild these two stepper units, and I'll show you how we do that. So if you're into stepper units, or if you've ever found yourself wondering just how in the world would you rebuild a stepper unit, you found the right video. So let me get the vacuum cleaner. I'm gonna make that disappear. I'm going to make that disappear. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll mess with these relays first. Okay, so with the exception of under the playfield, on the back side of the playfield, these are the last relays in the actual cabinet that we have to mess with. And if you look really close over on the end, they have labels that say 1 and 2 reset and 3 and 4 reset. So that's these. So whenever the game turns on, these relays pull in and these switches send power up to, so this one is the 1 and 2. So it sends power through one of the switches on these score reels on the first player and the second player. And those stay energized until the reset relay drops out. So if one of these score reels is not on 0, then the switch on that score reel is closed. And there's actually 3 switches on each one. But so let's say this first one is not on 0. And now it's not. One of these switches at the top on that cam, let me try to brighten you up so you can actually see it. I'll show it here in a minute whenever we pull them out. You can also see all the dirt on the actual reel. One of these switches, see the two little white things there? That's on the end of a little cam. And see the little blades? And see how the cam is interacting with the switches? Well, one of those switches closes whenever you're off of 0. So let's say your score is 1225. So all 4 of those are not on 0, and that switch is closed on each one of them. Whenever the game resets, it turns on these 2 relays, and they pull in, which closes the switches, which sends power up to here. It goes through the switch that's closed to the coil, and it starts pulling in. Well, what happens? when it gets to 0, the switch opens up and it stops at 0. So the purpose of that switch is just to reset it back to 0. The purpose of these two relays is just to reset it back to 0. And this one says 1,000 point relay on the side. I would assume, the papers are missing, but I would assume this is the 100 point relay and the 10 point relay. I talked about this on the one we were doing just the other day. I believe. I work on so many pinballs, they go together, but it's really irrelevant which one's which. It doesn't really even matter, but you just clean them all, get them all working. So if it has a switch on it that's open, normally you want it to close whenever the relay pulls in. If it's closed, normally you want it to open when the relay pulls in. If you get any that are always closed or always open, there's a problem. And we use an old file that's worn out. You don't want to use anything with the ability to cut up the points to clean the contacts. So you see those two there. Let me see if I can make it do what it do. What happened? Oh, it fell over. Okay, see the switch set on the left? See, they're not touching right now, so that's an open switch. Now when the relay pulls in, this gets power through it, turns it into a magnet. It pulls that plate in, which moves that actuator. So the two on the left, see how the big long blade that goes up through the plastic actuator? It moves over and touches the small one. See how the small one moves a little bit? That's how you want it. And then whenever this one pulls in, look, they're already closed. And when it pulls in, they open. But see how when it goes back, the shorter blade moves a little bit? Well, that's how you want it. Perfectly adjusted, people. Now don't go through and adjust all of the ones that aren't perfect. That would be a bad idea, because these things, they kind of get into a place where they like the way that they're working. And the best thing you can do is just play them every once in a while. If you let it sit a while, things get dirty and things like that. But if you actually play them a little bit, that rubbing action where they rub against each other actually cleans the contacts a little bit. So best thing you can do is play them a little bit. All right, so I'm going to clean up those, and then we will be done with those, and we will work on these stepper units here, and I'll show you how all of that works out. So I cleaned those, and I remembered now, this one does say 1,000 point relay on it, but this is not the 100 or the 10, because I remember I found those on the bottom of the playfield in the last video. It was this same machine. All right, so we're going to work on a stepper unit. Now, we already did the two in the bottom of the playfield. These are some of the most problematic areas of them. So if you get an old machine and it's giving you problems where like it won't let you play a two-player game, or it's always on a two-player game, or whenever you lose the ball, it doesn't move to the next ball, or anything like that, or the thing just sits there and resets over and over again. A lot of times it's one of these stepper units. So they call them a stepper unit because they have all these different positions. So they have a little wheel that can spin around, and there's a bunch of different kinds. This one has like an actual complete wheel with lots of little rivets on it, or little feet on it. The ones down at the bottom were the kind with fingers on them. So as they move, they hit different contacts. They call those spiders sometimes. But they're all stepper units. So what happens is, over time, they get where they don't step. You got to help them step. So this particular one has two coils. So one coil would be to move the wheel one way, and one coil is to move the wheel the other way. So this coil, whenever it pulls in like that, it moves this little lever, which pushes up against the gear and moves the wheel. Well, we're already all the way to its last position, so it's not moving anymore. So this other one, whenever it pulls in, it resets it back to the original home position. So you see what happened? It only spun about halfway. So it should have spun all the way back down to there. So let's look real close at this one rivet. So see the rivet that it's on? So I'll pull in one step, and I had to help it. See how it's like in between rivets too? It's on like two at the same time. Second step, same problem. Third step, I barely got it to work. So this unit only pulls 3 steps, and this is the player unit. So at the end of each ball, it will pull in, and that's player 1. If it steps up once, that's player 2. 3 times, that's player 3. 1 more time, that's player 4. So that's all it does. So they've got wiring going to all of these wires that connect on the back of this plate. See all the little solder and the rivets and the lines and everything? To different little rivets on the plate. So what's happening is, as it turns, so like right now it's on player 1, it's connecting this wire to this wire, this wire to this wire, this wire to this wire. And it's basically sending all of the signals for instance, what lights are on. So like the first player score lights are on, which score reels are turned on. So whenever you get a score, it doesn't put them on the third player, it puts it on the first player's score, all that kind of stuff. And so by that being able to move, it can move it to where it does different players. So now it's the end of the first player, it goes up, now we're on player 2, and it will do the same thing for player 2. Now on a lot of these, if it's a multiplayer game, if you're playing like a 1-player game, what it'll do is it'll be on player 1, when your ball ends, it'll go clack, 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 and then reset to player 1 again. So you'll see it actually go as the lights light up, and then it'll go back to player 1. Very, very cool the way they were able to do that. And the reason that they have to do it like this is because what if you're playing a 3-player game? Well, it should light up player 1, then player 2, then player 3, and then it will just for a second light up player 4 and then go reset back to player 1. And so they ran into a lot of problems that you wouldn't think that you would immediately run into whenever they made these multiplayers. So all of the companies had their different ways of doing it. But you can see how this one doesn't reset right and it doesn't step up right. Well, what that means is you'd never be able to play a game because you'd get stuck on player 2.5 or something. It's just not going to work. So we've got to clean that up and make it step right. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to reset it to one of its extremes. So either you want it as far as it'll go that way, and see if I push it, it'll go farther. So that might not be the best one. Whoa. Let's make it where it's as far as it'll go this way, because I can't push it any farther back, right? So I've got it in its first position, which is its home position. And I'm going to take this nut off, and I'm going to take this wheel off. Now on this particular one, I'm not so sure that you can put it on backwards. Maybe. It might go either way. Some people mark them. I don't like doing that. I just take them off. The little, I'll show you here in a minute, there's a slot where it'll only go 2 ways. I just take it off and lay it down. And then I can remember. It just goes right back on like that. So I'll pop that off, and then we'll look at what I usually do to clean them. So it came right off. My personal opinion on this one, I think it could go either way. But see how there's a little slot keyed into the stud there? So it can only go 2 ways. My personal opinion is on this particular one, it could only go one. Like if you put it either way, it would work the same. But many of them are not like that. It has to go one way. So what I do is, these rivets, you want to get them nice and shiny. So you can clean them with a magic eraser or whatever. I use sandpaper, but I use really light sandpaper. I don't go crazy with it, because if you get rid of that rivet, you'll have all kinds of problems. So you just clean it up. Get it as good as you can. Nice and shiny. A lot of times whenever you find one that somebody's worked on, you'll see something like this, where you can see sand marks on the actual Bakelite. Good way to tell if somebody's ever cleaned it. And sometimes you get, see how there's a little ring, a black ring inside of all of the rivets? That's just because it's not perfectly flat. Don't go overboard, man. You don't want to sand that perfectly flat. If I keep sanding on that, it's going to sand it away, you know. And it's got a little, it's not perfectly flat. So if I keep sanding until I don't see the black ring anymore, I'm destroying the rivet. So you don't really want to do that. The way it looks right now, that's good enough. You're not trying to make them look perfect. You just want to clean them up. And again, if you can do it with some kind of degreaser or something, that's fine too. But I just hit them with a little bit of sandpaper. Works great for me. Now the black that you're seeing on it is, these originally did have a little bit of grease on them. And we're going to put that back on here in a minute. But first thing I'm going to do is just sand all that down. Just again, lightly, just to get it all looking pretty good. Because you're basically trying to give it a good surface for these little rivets to ride up against. And then I also do the same thing with just the tip of the rivet. Just clean it off and get it nice and shiny like that one is. But again, don't go crazy. You're not trying to get rid of any metal, just the dirt on the metal, basically. Look how beautiful. That's how you want it. Now, the little fingers slide over the contacts, so you want to lubricate it a little bit. So this is what you want. Order this exact product. It works great. The reason that you can't just put anything on there is because it has to be dielectric, which somehow, now, I know I get a lot of people watching that really know their stuff. Dielectric not only means that it makes it conduct electricity, but it also means that it insulates from allowing it to conduct electricity. I don't know how it does both at the exact same time, but it does somehow. So that's what you want, because if you put just regular something that's conductive on there, it will make it where all of these are connected together if you put the wrong stuff on it, right? Excellent dielectric, impervious to salt water, highly lubricious, clear and non-toxic. This is the stuff you want. I use this stuff on everything. I'm trying not to cuss anymore. You know that commercial where that woman says, I put that on everything. That's what I do with this. It's the perfect product because, again, it's dielectric. So that's what we want. So we're going to put that on all the rivets. Smear it on there really good. And from the factory, it had some kind of stuff like that on it. And you do that, too, so that it doesn't wear, you know. So on this side, okay, so one of the reasons that it doesn't turn right is because you've got a little bit of drag there, you know. You've got all of these pins pushing on it at the same time. You also want to mess with each one to make sure that they push in a little bit, because depending on how you have your nut on there, it will have more or less blah, blah, blah. You get the whole point, right? So that's one of the things that makes it not turn right. You will also see on this side there are a bunch of springs that make it do its thing. Sometimes these springs get damaged. Over time, they kind of lose their springiness slightly, but there's things you can do to, you know, make them shorter and all that. I try not to do that. I try to use just the original springs if they're in good shape like these are. There's also one wound around the middle there. So you can take this loose and then unwind it and then pull that whole thing out if you want. If you do that, count the number of times that has went around. Okay, and then sometimes you have to lubricate it. So in the middle, on this particular one, now they are different. That's a metal on metal shaft. You want to lubricate that. So if you got metal touching metal, you want to oil it. So I'm going to put a little bit of oil on it. 3-in-1 oil, either 10 weight or 20 weight, and you can buy all of that at Lowe's, 10 weight or 20 weight. The 10 weight is in the red can like this. So this is real lightweight. I don't know if it says 10 weight on there. This is 10 weight though. And then they make another one that has like a blue label. That's the 20 weight. And you can buy both of those at Lowe's. Look how bright I've got it adjusted right now so y'all can see everything. So you want to oil that a little bit. So if you're doing it at your house, you got plenty of time. You can unwrap this, count how many times it was wrapped around itself to there, and then pull it out and then very carefully put it back in. But to do that, you have to remove these switches because the they stick over the gear there. See, I mean, it'll slide right out. I'm not going to do that though. What I'm going to do is just pull it out a little bit, and then I'm going to drop a couple drops of oil on the back onto the shaft as it goes through, and then I'm going to push it through and spin it a little bit and get the oil in there nice and good and get it lubricated. So the drag of the metal on metal inside slows it down where it doesn't step right, and then the drag of the pins on the dirt and the grease and the grime that's all over this slows it down where it doesn't spin right. If your springs are messed up, it will make it where it doesn't step right too, because I think I can do this right now as long as we reset it. See the gear there? So this pulls in, and the spring, see how it pulled it down into underneath the next gear? And so then whenever the coil lets back out, it steps it up. Well, the reason it steps it up is because of this spring. Right? So it pulls it, and it will fall under the next one. And then this spring is extended, and so when it lets go, it will push it up to the next one. So if these springs are messed up, it'll cause you problems as well. But I've found if you oil the thing, you get this nice and clean, get some grease on it where it'll move around. Usually you don't have to mess with these springs. If by chance your springs are all screwed up, somebody's stretched them, they've broke it, you got one missing, if you go to the Pinball resource, pbresource.com, they sell spring kits. So they make brand new springs for these things, and they're cheap. They're not even that much money. So why don't I put them on because they're so cheap? Well, because I'd have to order them and then wait for them. I don't want to do that. We're working on it tonight. Another thing you can do is you can cheat. You can wrap this around one extra time. But why wouldn't you want to do that? It's because it makes it harder for it to step up. So this one is the one that resets it back to the beginning, and these two are the ones that make it step up. So if you wrap that one around one extra time, yeah, it'll reset farther, but then it's harder to step it up, so then you have to shorten these springs. So you can cheat these by pulling it up and hooking maybe like right here over this, making the spring shorter and it's stronger. But once you do that, you're better off not doing that if you can help it. If you have to, do it, but you're probably better off buying new springs at that point. Okay, so I'm going to slide that out a little bit, get a little bit of oil on it, and then I'm going to put the grease on it. I'm going to put the wheel back on it, and we'll see if it steps up and resets the way it should. Okay, so I've got it back on there, and it's resetting, but if you, like we were showing earlier, it doesn't line up with the rivets perfectly. So there's like the first step. See, it's kind of in between the rivets. So this big board here has an actual adjustment on it. That's 2 screws in there. And so you can actually take this wheel off and adjust the 2 screws and move the board slightly. But the whole thing is, how did it get like that? The reason it got like that is because this board's a little loose usually. So usually if you just mess with it a little bit, you can get it to go ahead and move. So we want to get it where it's a little more lined up. Let's see if I can get it to move. Bam! It twisted slightly. So there we go. Let's see if that's a little better. So it's lined up on the first position, the next position, the next position, and the final position. So that's much better. You don't want it touching 2 rivets at the same time. So you could, now that I've moved it, you could take that back off, tighten it up, but it's all right if it's got a little bit of play in it. It took a little bit of force to move it. So that one's properly adjusted. It resets. So it overshoots it just a little bit when it resets. There's an adjustment for that too, I think. Yeah. This screw down here will actually adjust that. But I think we're good. And whenever you test these, if you're simulating the thing pulling in, it does it pretty violently. It does it very quick, right? So this is the home position, first position, second position, third position. Or first player, second player, third player, fourth player. First player, second player, third player, fourth player. Fix that one. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the next two, and that will be it for the stepper units. Okay, so we got those done. Now we're going to do the score reels. So I'm going to show you how we do that. They're a little bit different on each era of machine, but this is a mid-70s Williams, I'm sorry. So there is a little clip on these that you squeeze one way or the other, and it pops out of its holder. Now you don't need to do this often. You just kind of need to do it once and then you're pretty much done, but you might have to adjust them at some point. So what we're going to mess with is we're going to clean the actual wheel itself. We're going to clean the contacts on that board down there, and we're going to adjust these and clean these switches. So that's the main things that we have to do. So first we're going to take it all apart. So this wheel here has a little C-clip on it. So I'm going to take that off and pop this wheel off, and I'll show you how that happened. Okay, so the way that it works is this wheel sits down on the shaft, and if you think about it, it needs to know what number it's showing you. So it needs to know when you have 90 points or 80 points or whatever, right? We're actually doing the tens reel, and if you notice, there is a little fake reel on the back. So you can't score 1 point, you can score 10 points. So this is the first reel, even though it's 10-point reel. So if you look, there's this little cam on the bottom that has this weird shape, and all of this is on purpose. Right? So this little track here, this little nub sits inside that track. So as the wheel spins around, if it only goes in one position, and as it spins around, it can move this cam by just spinning the wheel with the cam inside of that track. And so if you look very carefully, there are 3 sets of switches. And it's hard to see with the wires behind them. But here's one, the top set. See the 2 contacts? And then there are 2 more in the middle, and then there are 2 at the end. The 2 at the end are open right now. So on this particular setup, that is the 9-point switch. So what happens is, it stays about where it's at right now until it gets to the number 9. And when it gets to number 9, this moves this way, up that little ramp on the track on that cam, and it makes that move and it closes the bottom switch. But it doesn't move enough that it does anything with the other 2 switches. See how they're all closed? So that's how it sits at 9, whenever the score reel says 9. So the reason that it does that is by closing that bottom switch, the next time you get 10 points, it will not only move this one to 0, but because that switch is closed, it will also send a little signal over to the next reel and move it up 1. So that's how you get 10 points out of it. So that's how it is when it's at 9. When it goes to 0, the cam goes the other way. Like that. And by doing that, it's hard to see because of the wires. Now all 3 switches are open. So why does it do that? It's because one of the switches is the reset one that we were talking about. So that's how it opens up the reset switch, and it knows that it's at 0. It's because that switch opened up. And the other one is, I can't even remember why we need the other one. There's a reason for the other 0 switch too. We'll look on the schematics and see why that is, just to make sure I give you the complete explanation since we're going deep into the score reels. Let's look on the schematics and I'll show you why it has to open up the other one too. So here's the relevant part of the schematics. You can see these are all the score reel the score reel relays that are on the drums themselves, right? And so as you can see, when the reset relays pulse, the 1 to 2 reset relay or the 3 to 4 reset relay, when they pulse, it pulls this switch in, which provides power as long as the switch is closed. First player 10-point drum unit open at 0. So that's one of the switches that we were just looking at. We're actually doing the 10-point drum unit right now. So when it gets back to 0, that switch opens up. Well, if this relay keeps firing and keeps held in, keeps pulsing, it won't do anything to this one because it opened up. So that switch opened up, so the first player drum unit stops at 0 and it stays there. That's why when you see them reset, you'll see some of them get to 0 and they stop, and the other ones just keep on clicking away and they're still trying to get to 0, and it all happens very fast though. You know, usually only takes 4 or 5 seconds. Okay, so why do they need the other one? Because there's 2 switches that open at 0. The third one also opens, but remember the third one stays open. The only time it closes is when it's at 9. Okay, so the third one, let me find where it is. It's here somewhere. Yeah. So here is the 1 and 2 player reset relay and the 3 and 4 player reset relay. So how do they get their power? They get pulsed by an impulse, a switch on the impulse cam on the score motor as the score motor is turning. And then they get their power through the reset relay. Now these are different relays now. This is the 1 and 2 reset relay and the 3 and 4 reset relay. They're talking about the players. This is the regular reset relay that turns everything on. But look how they get their power. They will continue to have power as long as any of the switches on the drum unit 0 position brake switches are still closed. So those 2 relays will stay engaged until all 16 of those switches open up. So if you think about it, that makes sense. So it keeps resetting as the score motor turns. It keeps resetting, keeps resetting, keeps resetting, keeps resetting, keeps resetting. And some of them get back to 0 and they stop, and then it will keep resetting and keep resetting and keep resetting, because what's keeping it running is one of these switches is still closed. So if you get one that just keeps doing that, and one of the relays just keeps, one of the scores just keeps turning past 0 over and over and over again, well, one of those 2 switches is misadjusted. So that's what we're looking at. So let's go back to the machine. So that's how the switches work. Now you can't check those without the reel on it, because you need to put the reel on it and then work it through and make sure that those open and close at the right time. And it's different on different machines. So depending on Williams, Bally, Gottlieb, they'll be different. Okay. And so to get that, to actually get this wheel off is a little tricky. You have to turn it around. See how that spot is flat there? So you got a little bit more room there. So if you turn that around just right, and then you pull this in just right, and move it out of the way just right, and pull this out of the way just right, you can get that thing to pop off of there. It's a little bit tricky though. That is without a doubt the hardest part of rebuilding these. That's the tricky part. Okay, so now that we're in there, we're going to take this spring loose here. And you can pull out the plunger, just clean it off. Some people will replace the coil sleeves and everything. It's usually not necessary. You just need to get as much of this dust cleaned off of it as you can. This is electromechanical dust. So basically, these little magnets attract dust for whatever reason. I don't know, but they get black dust all over everything. You've ran into that before if you ever worked with electric motors. So I'm going to use sandpaper just like we used on the stepper units to clean up that PCB board a little bit, the traces there. Literally just exactly the same. So let's do that and see if we can get it looking a little better. So I cleaned it up, put the grease on it, put the plunger back in it. Now there is one more switch back here that is the end of stroke switch. So when the 10-point relay pulls in this coil, it's very important that it goes all the way back, because if it only goes some of the way back, this little cam there or whatever won't be far enough to see the little gears down there underneath. That rides way down in there. So it won't be, if it doesn't go all the way back, it won't fall off that ledge enough to where it can push it to the next score. So it'll do this. It'll go about halfway and then stop. Okay? So it's very important that this fires all the way back. So this is how they made it do that. That is the end of stroke switch. It only opens when it goes all the way back. So once again, let me show you on the schematics how that is. So here's the 10-point relay way up here at the top. All right? And so all of these lines are things that make the 10-point relay fire. So let's say that right bottom kicker switch connects. And so whenever that happens on the playfield, that switch will close, which will connect power through the switch up to the half of the coil that's not connected to the other side of the power. So then the coil will have power and it will energize. That will pull in the 10-point relay, which will, that little actuator will move, and then all of the switches on the 10-point relay will connect. So when they connect, this little switch connects. It's a switch on the 10-point relay that feeds power to the 10-point relay. So why do they do that? They do that so that if you just barely hit the kicker switch on the playfield, if that switch just barely connects, if it's enough to pull in the 10-point relay far enough that it connects its own switch together, then it gets power a different way. So that way, if the ball rolls off that switch, the 10-point relay stays energized. Now, why do they need it to stay energized? So that it can pull in that coil on the score reel long enough to actually turn the number. So you see the problem. If it would just hit it real quick, well, it would just pull in just for a second, and it wouldn't pull in enough to make the score turn 10 points, or 1 point actually. So you just barely hit the switch, and the relay starts pulling in. Well, when the relay starts pulling in, the switch, you saw whenever we were adjusting, I've got grease all over my hands. You saw whenever we were adjusting them, they were so close, right? Just a little bit would make them contact. So that one contacts. Well, now there is a second path to power. So if the switch on the playfield, if the ball rolls off of it, that's okay because that relay is still getting power through this switch. But look how else they wired this same source of power. It runs through the fourth player 10-point drum unit end of stroke switch, third player, second player, and first player. So what does that mean? It means if any of those four end of stroke switches open, it kills power that's being held through that switch on the relay, and with the ball no longer on the switch on the playfield, it kills the power to the 10-point relay, turns it on. So if you get one where it's sticking on, so you score 10 points and it goes and it just sits there, and you hear noise and stuff, it's because that end of stroke switch is misadjusted, probably. Sometimes it's because the switch on the playfield is permanently stuck together or something, but usually it's that end of stroke switch. Because if you notice, with the 10-point relay there, if all of these are always stuck together and they never open when the score reel pulls in, if that switch does not open, then the relay will hold itself on indefinitely. And so what happens if the relay stays on? Well, the score turns, and it just sits there and goes, oh. Sometimes they'll even adjust a little bit too far and stuff. So something to look for. Also, if you get a situation where you're scoring, you hit a switch on the playfield, and the thing just goes, and it twitches, but it doesn't score, or let's say that you score 50 points, and it goes, ding, 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 but the score reel just goes, ding, 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 and you only get maybe 2 scores, it's the end of stroke switch. Also, worth thinking about, it can be any of them. So we're looking at the first player one right now, but keep in mind, if the second player end of switch is disconnected, it'll do the same thing. It won't let that thing pull in all the way like it should every time. So you got to get all of these end of stroke switches properly adjusted and cleaned. If they're dirty, it's just the same as if they're open because they're not electrically connected. Okay, so next up, we have to clean the actual reel. You can clean it with like a wet rag or something, a wet paper towel. You got to be careful though about spraying anything on the reel because this black paint, on some of the manufacturers, this stuff will just wipe right off if you get it wet. So you be very careful. Test a little space. See how that 7 has a little bit of it coming off? This stuff will come right off. I mean, you can just make it a white reel if you on some of them if you are not watching what you're doing. One thing you can spray a little bit of Windex or something on like a paper towel, or you can actually wax it off too. So if you've got wax for the play field, wax is actually a cleaner. So if you take wax and just wax the wheel, it'll wax all the dirt off. So I'm gonna clean it up a little bit. Obviously, cleaning is not my forte, but I get them at least presentable. They always get a lot of black dust and dirt inside of them too, so it's even harder to clean that, but we'll get a little bit of that off. I'm mostly concerned about just getting it where the face looks good whenever you see it through the actual score window. So we'll clean that up and then we're ready to pop it back in. All right, so it's going to be hard to show you this. Whoa, but I'll try. This is the tricky part, is putting it back together. You have to get this and this behind this. So it's just a big pain. So you have this flat spot here that is the only place that this part can slip past to get up to here. So you have to do this kind of tricky ambidextrous thing where you pull the thing in and kind of push it up out of the way. All right, so I got it. Now you see this one though is still under it. So you gotta kind of pull it out of the way and snap it down into place. Now that looked real easy. That will not be easy when you go to do it. It's a pain, man. I've just done hundreds of them. Okay, so now that we have that, let me see if I can get you to see the switches here. Are you ready for your switches? I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Let me brighten it way up. Let's go crazy bright. Okay, so I'm going to, there's a little plastic piece on the back where I can fire this. I might be able to do this better without the tripod. Let's try it without the tripod, people. You've been warned. You're too close. There we go. All right, so we are on number 8 right now. Okay, so I'm going to fire it. And what should happen? All 3 of them should be closed. Right now the bottom 2 are closed. It's upside down, but the one that's on top of the screen here is open. So when I go to 9, all 3 of them are closed. Now when I go to 0, remember they should all open. If you know what you're looking at, you can tell they're all open. Okay, now when I go to 1, 2 of them should close. Right? So all of them are closed except for the 9 one. It's open. So we're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're all closed. 0, they're all open. Voila. Now I just have 15 more to do. Another thing you'll run into on these is that these wires bust loose. The way they're soldered usually is that they're just soldered onto the switch. They're not through the switch. So they will break loose as you're working on them. So I need to solder that one back, and look at this. That one too, same thing. See how clean the switch looks where it was soldered? They didn't do a great super job at the factory on them, so they will come loose pretty easily. So I cleaned and I cleaned and I cleaned, and look how nice and shiny they are. This might be the best cleaning job I've ever done. Look at this. 16 clean score reels. This is the kind of thankless work that you do whenever you're getting one of these back how it's supposed to be. Look how clean even the back box looks. I mean, the thing's still in pretty nice shape. Whoever gets this is going to be blessed with a nice old pinball machine. So we cleaned up all 16 of them, and I watched carefully as I cleaned the switches that they opened and closed at the right time. And you saw that we did the 3 stepper units. This is also a stepper unit, but all it does is move the reel. There's no Bakelite board on it or anything. It just moves. It just moves the numbers so that you can see how many credits are left on it. We got the relays right. We already had done the Jones plugs. So I think the back box is completely done. Hopefully it helps you figure out how the stepper units work and how the score units work, score reels work. And then what I always do too, let me darken it up so you can see it a little better. What I always do whenever I'm working on these, and I'm trying to get them back the way that they're supposed to be, is I leave them on a number other than 0. Now, of course, the first 0 there is fake, but I leave all the reels on a number other than 0 so that whenever you start it up, that will tell you once and for all if all of these will reset right. All of this unsung work just to get the thing reliable. If people came in and looked at this compared to how it was 3 days ago, they wouldn't think that I'd done anything to it. But you saw what I did, people. I went through the whole bottom of it on the first video. And then I went through the whole back box on this video. We've done all kinds of work on it. Hours and hours and hours of work, and you can't even tell. That's the kind of stuff, though, you got to do to get them reliable. I mentioned before, though, once you do this, you kind of don't have to do it again. Once it's already been gone through and everything's been cleaned, everything's been adjusted, if you get any trouble out of it, you just chase down the alligators, because the swamp's already drained. So we've found everything that we possibly can that's dirty. Yeah, we've got a nice little base here to build a working, nice, complete game off of it. So on the next video, we will mess with the play field. That's coming right up. So I hope you enjoyed it. Give us a thumbs up for taking the trouble to film it for you. And I wish we were far enough along that we could actually play it, but can't do it yet, folks. Maybe next video. I don't know. Maybe next video. So leave your comments below. Let us know what you think. Make sure to check out our brother's channel, My Brother Donnie. You can Google him if you want, but the link is down below. We're always having fun over there. We've been working on our vehicles lately over there. Pretty cool. But we've got some buildings that we're going to be refurbishing like we refurbished these old pinball machines. If you think these pinball machines are old, wait till you see these buildings we're working on. But go check that out if you haven't already. It's called My Brother Donnie. It's here on YouTube, and it is literally My Brother Donnie. So I'll see you over there, and we'd like to thank everybody that has been using our Amazon links. So we have links down below. If you're going to go buy something on Amazon, if you click our link before you do it, Amazon counts that as us sending you to Amazon to make a purchase, and they give us a little royalty for it. So thank you for everybody that's been doing that. I was just looking on there earlier, and people buying all kinds of cool stuff. A lot of people buy electronics stuff for it, because I think a lot of our viewers are repair people and people that are handy with the electronics. So we appreciate all of you that have been doing that. A lot of people have been buying just regular groceries and things like that too. So thank you to everyone that's been doing that, and to our international viewers who have been doing that now that we have the international links. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Leave your comments below. Let us know what you think so far, and we will see you on the next video.